The room fell quiet the moment I slid that leather folder across the table. You could hear the clink of my father's fork against his plate, sharp, metallic, final. Ryan's face drained of color, his smile freezing mid-sentence. 12 family members sat around that glossy oak table, the smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon pies thick in the air. Outside, golden light spilled through the colonial windows, the picture of a perfect Thanksgiving. Inside, it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. "Ethan," my father said, voice cracking slightly, "what's this supposed to be?" "It's the truth," I replied. "The one you buried." For a moment, no one moved. My aunt's hand hovered in midair, still holding her wine glass. My mother looked from me to my father, confusion clouding her face. Ryan leaned forward, his Rolex catching the light. He always liked to make sure people noticed it. That folder wasn't just paper. It was the weapon I'd spent 10 months sharpening. Everything they'd taken from me, everything they'd built on lies, was in there. But before I tell you how I burned down my family's kingdom, you need to understand where this fire started. I grew up in suburban Connecticut, in one of those neighborhoods where every lawn looked identical and every family pretended to be happy. From the outside, we were perfect. 2 sons, one golden, one invisible. Guess which one I was? Ryan was 3 years older and 300 times more adored. He was the quarterback, the honor student, the reason my dad smiled. When Ryan graduated, they threw a party with a live band and a rented tent. When I graduated, we went to Olive Garden, just the 4 of us, and Dad ordered water to keep things modest. When Ryan left for his private university, he got $100,000 college fund. I got a pat on the back and a brochure for community college. Every family photo told the same story. Dad's arm around Ryan's shoulder, me standing somewhere near the edge, cropped halfway out of the frame. But there was one person who saw me, my grandfather, Thomas. He was a World War II vet who built a small manufacturing company from nothing. Sold it in the 90s. Retired with enough money to live comfortably, but never lost his sense of fairness. Every Sunday I'd drive to his house. He'd make pot roast and tell me stories. About the war, about integrity, about how a man's worth is measured by how he treats people who can't give him anything. In summer, we'd fish at Lake Warmog. I'd be half asleep in the boat, the sun on my face, and he'd say, "You've got a good heart, Ethan. Don't let anyone make you small. Not even family." I didn't realize that would become a prophecy. When Grandpa got sick, pancreatic cancer, it was fast. I was there almost every day after work, reading to him, helping him take his meds, just being there. My dad came for the big moments. When the hospice nurse called with updates, Ryan showed up twice. Once with coffee, once with excuses. The night before he passed, Grandpa squeezed my hand and said, "Whatever happens after I'm gone, don't lose yourself, kid." I told him I wouldn't. I wish I'd known what was coming. After the funeral, my father called a family meeting at a lawyer's office downtown. The will reading. I didn't expect a fortune. Maybe something small. A photo, his fishing rod, maybe the old pocket knife he always carried. Something that meant I mattered. When the lawyer finished reading, the world tilted. Everything, his house, his savings, his investments, $850,000 total, went to Ryan. My name wasn't even mentioned. I remember staring at the polished table, trying to process it. My father looked content, like the decision confirmed something he'd always believed. Ryan deserved it all. After the meeting, I caught him in the parking lot. "Dad, why?" I asked. "Why would Grandpa do that?" He didn't even look at me. "Ryan has a family, a mortgage, kids on the way. You're single. You'll be fine." Just like that. Like I was an extra piece in a family photo he could crop out. I didn't eat for 3 days. Couldn't sleep. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., replaying every memory with Grandpa, trying to figure out where I went wrong. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe even he'd stopped believing in me. Meanwhile, Ryan's life turned into a highlight reel. Within weeks, he bought a mansion in Greenwich, a 6-bedroom palace with a pool and a 3-car garage. Then came the BMW for him, a Mercedes for his wife, and an Instagram feed full of gratitude posts. Family is everything. He tagged my dad in every photo. I'd scroll through those posts at night, the glow of my phone lighting up the dark. He looked like a king, and his brother, felt like a ghost. But ghosts see things the living don't. Because one night, as I was digging through old emails on Grandpa's laptop, I found something. A message from his accountant, dated 2 weeks before he died. The subject line read, "Updated estate documents. Please confirm notarization." That was the spark. And that's how this story really began. The email haunted me for days. I read it over and over again, like I was trying to will more words onto the screen. Updated estate documents. Please confirm notarization. It was sent to my grandfather's accountant just 14 days before he died. If he updated his estate that late, then why did the lawyer only read one will, the old one? Something didn't add up. I drove to Grandpa's old house the next morning. It sat empty now, still on the market, the for sale sign slightly tilted like it had been punched by the wind. I parked on the curb and just sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. I could still see him sitting on the porch, sipping coffee, waving when I pulled up every Sunday. Now it was just silence and peeling paint. I knew breaking in wasn't smart, but I still had a key. Grandpa gave it to me years ago, in case of emergencies. This felt like one. Inside, the air smelled like dust and time. Furniture covered in white sheets. Family photos still on the wall. Ryan at his graduation, Ryan at his wedding, Ryan holding his baby. I wasn't in any of them. Not one. I went straight to his study. His old roll-top desk was still there. I opened drawers, letters, pens, a box of medals, even his fishing license. But then, tucked behind a stack of tax folders, I found something that made my heart stop. A receipt from a notary service in New Haven, dated October 15th, 2 weeks before he passed. The description: estate documentation witnessed and notarized. That was it. Proof that a new will existed. I took photos of everything and drove straight home. My hands were shaking the whole way. If this was real, it meant someone, my father, maybe Ryan, had buried that will. Literally stolen my inheritance. I didn't have money for a private investigator, so I used what I did have, my brain. I'd been working as a systems analyst at a small IT firm for 5 years. I knew how data worked, how things left trails. I started by checking the probate court's online system. The file documents matched the old will, dated a year before Grandpa's death. Nothing newer. But court systems don't erase versions, they just don't show them publicly. So I called the probate lawyer Richard Morrison. He was 78, semi-retired, and when I mentioned my grandfather's name, there was a pause on the line. "Thomas Patterson," I said quietly. Aside, "I remember him well. Good man." "I think there's been a mistake," I said. "Or maybe something worse." Silence again. Then he said, "Come in tomorrow at 10 a.m. We'll talk." His office was like stepping back in time. Dark wood, stacks of papers, certificates on the wall. Morrison looked tired but sharp, with eyes that missed nothing. He listened while I told him everything, how I'd cared for Grandpa, how I was cut out, how I'd found the email and the notary receipt. When I finished, he folded his hands and said quietly, "There were complications before your grandfather passed." "What kind of complications?" I asked. He studied me for a long time. Then, almost reluctantly, he opened a drawer and took out a thin folder. "Your grandfather signed 2 wills," he said. "The first left everything to Ryan. But the second, dated October 15th, split the estate equally between you and your brother." My chest tightened. "So why wasn't it filed?" "Because," he said, "your father was the executor. It was his duty to file the most recent will. He didn't." The air left the room. I could hear the ticking of a clock somewhere behind me, painfully loud. "He knew," I said. "He knew, and still." Morrison nodded slowly. "I'm afraid so. I can't act without authorization, but I kept a copy in my archive. Properly witnessed. Signed by your grandfather's hospice nurse and his accountant. Both still alive as far as I know." He slid a photocopy across the desk. Grandpa's handwriting, shaky but unmistakable, filled the margin. "Both my grandsons have my heart. Both deserve fairness. This is my final word. Thomas." Something inside me cracked open. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about truth. That night I barely slept. My mind replayed every Thanksgiving, every holiday, every time Dad looked at Ryan like he was the second coming of Christ. Every time I'd been told I wasn't ready, or mature enough, or deserving yet. Now I had proof that the only man who'd ever believed in me had been betrayed by the people he trusted most. I called a local estate litigation attorney the next morning, a woman named Patricia Chun. Her online reviews called her a hurricane in heels. She took my call, listened in silence, then said, "Meet me at my office at 2 p.m. Bring everything." She wasn't what I expected. Mid-30s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She read the documents, the emails, the photos of the notary receipt. Then she looked at me and said, "Under Connecticut law, the newer will overrides the older one. If your father suppressed it, that's fraud. And if he filed under oath that no later will existed, that's perjury." I swallowed hard. "So we can win?" She smiled faintly. "We can bury them. But you should know this won't just destroy their finances. It'll destroy your family." I looked down at the copy of my grandfather's handwriting. "They destroyed it first." Patricia leaned back, crossed her arms, and said, "All right, Ethan, let's make sure they never forget what fairness really means." And that was the moment I stopped being the invisible son. The next 3 months of my life were a blur of late nights, coffee, and quiet fury. Patricia ran point on everything. She was methodical, cold, almost surgical in her precision. Her first move was simple but deadly. Freeze the estate records before my father or Ryan could destroy anything else. "Ethan," she said one morning, handing me a list of tasks. "We need to build a timeline that leaves zero room for denial. Emails, witness statements, notarization logs, text messages, everything. Think of it like a digital autopsy." I spent days combing through every scrap of data I could find. Grandpa's laptop, his old cloud backups, even the email archive I'd once used to send him funny videos. What I found wasn't just evidence, it was betrayal in code form. There was a deleted draft in his inbox from 2 weeks before his death. The subject line read, "For Ethan." The message was unfinished, but the first line hit me like a punch. "Don't let them tell you you're worth less." I stared at those words until my vision blurred. I'd been right all along. He never intended to cut me out. Patricia was relentless. She subpoenaed financial records, tracked down the hospice nurse and the accountant who had witnessed the second will. Both confirmed that Grandpa was lucid and clear when he signed it. The nurse remembered his exact words. "Both my grandsons deserve an equal start." Meanwhile, I kept an eye on Ryan's social media. He was living like a king. Posts from Turks and Caicos. A new Rolex. A caption that read, "Grandpa's legacy lives on." It made me sick, but it also made me patient, because I knew what was coming. Patricia called me one evening around 9 p.m. "You're not going to believe what I found," she said. "Your brother's text history with your father. We got a partial data recovery from his old iCloud backup." "What's in it?" I asked. She read it aloud. "Dad, don't worry. He'll never know. Ryan, we're set for life." I didn't even speak for a moment. I just sat there, staring at the wall, my heart pounding. Patricia's voice softened. "This is the smoking gun, Ethan. It's enough for criminal charges." Criminal. The word echoed in my head. My father. The man who used to lecture me about honor and doing the right thing. The same man who once made me return a baseball glove I accidentally brought home from Little League practice because it wasn't mine. Now he was the thief. Over the next few weeks, we compiled everything into what Patricia called the kill file, a complete legal package that could detonate their entire facade in one move. Every document cross-checked, every signature verified. She wanted not just victory, but humiliation. At one point, she looked up from her notes and asked, "How far do you want to take this? You can settle quietly, get your half and walk away, or we go public. Court filings, press exposure, the works." I thought about it, about the family dinners where I sat in silence, listening to my father brag about Ryan's discipline, about how Mom just smiled through it, pretending not to notice me shrinking smaller and smaller in that house. I looked Patricia straight in the eyes. We go all the way. The waiting was the hardest part. Every night felt like a countdown. Ryan's Instagram stayed active. A blur of champagne glasses, smiling kids, perfectly curated happiness. The kind of happiness that comes easy when it's stolen. Meanwhile, I barely left my apartment. Coffee cups piled up. My therapist called it anticipatory grief. Mourning something you're about to lose. Except what I was losing wasn't a person. It was an illusion. I didn't hate them, not yet. I just wanted fairness. But as the weeks dragged on, that fairness started to feel more like fire. By November, Patricia was ready. She walked me through her plan. Thanksgiving. Your father's house. We'll do it there. Maximum exposure, maximum witnesses. He won't be able to hide behind charm or excuses. I blinked. You want me to ambush him at Thanksgiving? Ambush, she said, smirking slightly, is such a dramatic word. I prefer confrontation under oath. I laughed for the first time in months. She closed the folder and said quietly, once we start this, there's no going back. You might win the case, but you'll lose the family. I took a deep breath. They stopped being family when they lied. Patricia nodded. Then let's end this the way he began it. Formally, publicly, and without mercy. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, the copy of Grandpa's will in front of me. His handwriting stared back. Don't let anyone make you small. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I felt ready. Thanksgiving was 2 weeks away. And this year, gratitude would come with consequences. Thanksgiving arrived with the kind of cold, bright morning that almost feels cruel, blue sky, crisp air, everything pretending to be peaceful. My father's house looked exactly as it had every year since childhood. White colonial, wreath on the door, smell of roasted turkey wafting through the air. Except this time I wasn't there to eat. I was there to end something. Patricia's black sedan was parked down the street. She sat inside with her leather briefcase on the passenger seat, waiting for my signal. We'd gone over the plan a dozen times. I'd confront them during dinner, right before dessert. Enough witnesses, enough impact. Once the documents were out, she'd enter. The goal wasn't chaos, it was clarity. Public, undeniable clarity. When I rang the doorbell, Mom opened it. Her smile flickered, surprised. Ethan, you came. Yeah, I said, forcing a smile. Wouldn't miss it. Inside, the scene was picture perfect. Silverware shining. The table set for 12, laughter spilling from the dining room. Ryan was already holding court, wine glass in hand, his wife on his arm, both dressed like they were shooting a magazine spread. Look who decided to show up, he called out, his grin wide and sharp. Didn't think you'd make it this year. Yeah, I said, taking off my coat. I figured it's time I joined the family again. Dad clapped me on the shoulder. That's the spirit, son. Let's make it a good one. His tone was warm, almost rehearsed. Oh, it would be good. Just not for him. Dinner went on like a play I'd already seen too many times. Ryan dominated the conversation, bragging about his new rental property in Stanford and how he was crushing it in the markets. Dad beamed like a proud manager watching his star employee. At one point, Ryan lifted his glass and said, to family, and to knowing which son inherited Grandpa's drive. Laughter. Toasts. Even Mom forced a small smile, though her eyes flicked to me, uncertain. I just sat there steady, waiting. The folder rested in my bag by my feet, the weight of it grounding me. I wasn't nervous anymore, just quiet. When the plates were cleared and the pumpkin pie appeared, Dad raised his glass again. To blessings, he said, and to the wisdom of trusting the right people with responsibility. That was my cue. I set my fork down and said softly, speaking of responsibility, Dad, I found something you and Ryan might want to see. The room went still. Even the kids stopped talking. Ryan smirked. What is it this time, Ethan? Another conspiracy theory? No, I said, reaching into my bag. Just the truth. I slid the folder across the table. The sound of leather scraping would cut through the silence. Dad frowned. flipped it open, and froze. His eyes scanned the first page, then darted to Ryan. The blood drained from his face. "What is this?" Ryan asked, leaning over. "It's Grandpa's real will," I said. "The one you both decided to hide." The room erupted in overlapping voices. Questions, gasps, denials. My aunt covered her mouth. My cousin whispered, "Holy crap." Mom looked between us, trembling. "James, tell me he's wrong." Dad didn't answer. That was when Patricia entered. Calm, composed, every step deliberate. "Good evening," she said, her voice slicing through the noise. "Patricia Chun, legal counsel for Mr. Ethan Patterson." Ryan's wife's face went pale. "You brought a lawyer here?" Patricia ignored her. She placed a copy of the second will on the table and said, "This document was properly executed on October 15th, witnessed by 2 parties and notarized. Your father, as executor, was legally obligated to file it with probate court. Instead, he filed an older version, an act that constitutes probate fraud and perjury under Connecticut law." Dad's jaw tightened. "This is Thanksgiving dinner, for God's sake. And this," Patricia cut in, "is justice long overdue." She opened her briefcase and laid out the evidence like playing cards, witness statements, notarization logs, the recovered text messages. Ryan leaned back, shaking his head. "This can't be legal. There's got to be a statute of limitations." "There isn't," Patricia said, her tone ice cold. "Especially not when the fraud involves active concealment. You both swore under oath that no newer will existed. You lied." Ryan's wife began to cry quietly. My mother whispered, "James, please, tell me you didn't know." His silence said everything. Patricia delivered the final blow. "Here's the offer. Settle now, return $425,000 plus interest, totaling $456,000, or we file criminal charges and pursue treble damages in civil court." The room went dead quiet. Ryan looked at me, his voice shaking with anger. "You're destroying this family over money?" I met his eyes. "You destroyed it when you stole." He slammed his glass down, wine spilling across the table. "You always had to play the victim." Dad muttered something about fixing this privately, but Patricia stopped him cold. "That's not how justice works anymore, Mr. Patterson." I stood up. "I'm done pretending everything's fine. You taught me integrity meant doing the right thing even when it hurts. So here we are." For a moment no one breathed. Then Mom began to cry. The kids were ushered out of the room. My uncle got up and left without a word. And just like that, the family that had built its image on perfection began to collapse. Patricia packed up her documents, nodded to me, and left. I followed her to the door. Outside, the night was quiet, cold, and painfully still. She turned to me. "You did what had to be done." "Yeah," I said, my voice low. "But it doesn't feel like winning." She studied me for a second. "It never does." Behind us, through the window, I saw Dad sitting at the head of the table, head in his hands, shoulders shaking. Ryan just stared at the floor. The empire they'd stolen was crumbling, piece by piece. I walked to my car, started the engine, and for the first time in my life didn't look back. The silence after a war is worse than the noise of battle. That's what the next 8 months felt like. A long, echoing quiet where nothing felt real anymore. Ryan sold his Greenwich mansion within 48 hours of that Thanksgiving night. Panic sale. The buyer got it $200,000 under market. His BMW disappeared from the driveway a week later. I saw the repo truck on a neighbor's Facebook post. The caption read, "Tough times hit everyone eventually." They had no idea. My father's reputation shattered faster than any of us expected. He'd been on the board of 2 local businesses, the kind of man who prided himself on integrity and leadership. Within 2 months, both quietly asked him to step down. People at church stopped shaking his hand. Even his best friend, our old neighbor Mr. Cooper, stopped inviting him to golf. The house that once hosted perfect family holidays turned into a mausoleum. Mom called me once a week, her voice small, pleading, "Ethan, please, we can still fix this. He's your father." But every time I heard her voice, all I could think about was her silence when they took everything from me. She'd known something was wrong. I'd seen it in her eyes. She just chose not to say it. So I let the calls go to voicemail. The legal process was brutal. Depositions, mediation, court hearings, it all blurred together. I remember sitting across from my father in that sterile conference room, both of us under fluorescent lights, both pretending we didn't recognize the other. He wouldn't look at me, not once. Ryan, on the other hand, couldn't stop. His eyes burned holes through me, full of resentment and panic. He was unraveling. His wife filed for separation during the second month of proceedings. His investments turned out to be over-leveraged loans. When the bank came calling, he had nothing left to sell but his pride. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd stolen $850,000 to secure their legacy. Now they were broke, publicly disgraced, and soon to be prosecuted. Meanwhile, I just felt tired. Winning on paper didn't feel like winning at all. When the settlement finally came, it was March. The court approved Patricia's terms. Ryan and my father transferred $456,000 into my account, half the inheritance plus interest. I remember opening my banking app and staring at the number. It didn't feel like victory, felt like ashes. I used part of it to pay off my student loans and put a down payment on a modest condo in Providence. It was small, quiet, and mine. For the first time in my life, no one could take it away. The rest went into investments just like Grandpa taught me. Steady, patient, long-term. But the nights were the hardest. The quiet ones. The kind where you almost hear ghosts talking. Sometimes I dream of the Lake Warramog, and wake up expecting to smell Grandpa's pot roast or hear his laugh echo down the hallway. Instead, there was just silence. Mom eventually left Dad. I heard it secondhand from an aunt who still talks to her. She moved to a small apartment near the coast. Dad stayed in the colonial house, alone. The same place where it all fell apart. Ryan moved to North Carolina for a sales job. Rumor was he was trying to rebuild, though rebuild from what, I wasn't sure. His Instagram vanished. Maybe that was the real sign of collapse, when even his need for admiration dried up. I never answered Mom's messages. Not because I hated her, but because I didn't trust the version of myself that would pick up. I think she knew that too. One day, a thick envelope arrived at my new address. No return label, just my name, written in my mother's handwriting. Inside was a smaller envelope, brittle and yellowed with age. On it, Grandpa's handwriting, "For Ethan, when you've found the truth." My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter dated October 17th, the same week he signed the second will. "Ethan, if you're reading this, it means you found what they tried to hide. I never doubted you would. You were always the one who cared about fairness, not comfort. I hope you remember what I told you. Fight for what's right, but don't let bitterness make you smaller than the people who wronged you. Justice without peace is just another prison. You have my respect. You always did. Grandpa." I read it twice, then a third time until the ink blurred. For the first time in years, I cried. Not out of anger, not even relief, just grief for what we could have been. Now, a year later, holidays are quiet. No big tables, no toasts, no laughter echoing down the hall. But I light a candle every Thanksgiving. I cook a small pot roast the way Grandpa used to make it. I eat alone but not lonely. Because sometimes peace doesn't come from forgiveness. It comes from surviving the truth. I still keep the letter framed on my desk. And whenever I look at it, I hear his voice again. "Don't let anyone make you small." I didn't. But in the end, I learned something harder. Sometimes standing tall means standing alone. Would I do it again? Yes, every time. But if you asked me whether I won, I'm still not sure. Because some victories cost everything. And mine was paid in blood, family blood.